Good afternoon, everyone. I am Laura Miller from Mongoose, the Vice President of Marketing here, and I will be the facilitator for today's Ask Me Anything session. I am so excited to have a couple of friendly faces on the session this week. I've got my colleague Morgan McSweeney here, and then also Mike Martin from Hagerstown Community College. And so Mike is representing an on-campus perspective. He was so generous to jump on and have another conversation with me. I've already used a lot of his time because he has so many insights to share. So thanks for joining me, Mike. Let's go ahead and do some housekeeping. And then at about 2:01, 2:02 p.m. Eastern, we'll go ahead and get started with the discussion that we have today. So we are happy to answer any questions that you want to add, anything that you want to pose as a part of this conversation. You can make it so it's related to what we are covering, or just drop what you're thinking about. Drop anything student engagement related into the chat or into the Q&A panel. We've got two different ways to engage with us today, and we will work it in. If we don't get a chance to answer, because we have had some engaging sessions recently, then we will follow up with you. Don't worry about that. We will also follow up with the recording so that you can listen in, you can share it with your colleagues, and we will do that pretty soon after later this week once the session wraps. So with that in mind, it looks like we do have a couple of questions coming in. We're about a minute in, so I'll go ahead and just jump right into it. So Morgan and Mike, while I am going through the question panel here, how about we just introduce ourselves a little? Morgan, do you want to share what you do today, what you used to do? Why are you here today, Morgan? What's your perspective you're bringing to us?
Absolutely. Thanks, Laura, for this. I didn't realize to speak today you had to have MM as your initials and be bald, but we'll roll with it and make it work. So my name is Morgan McSweeney. I am account executive here for our Southeast territory here at Mongoose on our sales team. I've been with Mongoose coming up on a year here in a week or so. And prior to that, I spent my entire 15-year career on campus in higher ed, specifically in athletics advancement. So I came from the fundraising space, but I've always been in the athletics component as well. And prior to that, in my grad school years and undergrad, student workers in marketing, throwing out t-shirts, and facilities event management, lining baseball fields, and working in our media relations office for a year and a half. So really kind of tried to garner a little bit in the entire student athlete experience and all the avenues that I could. And then I got into fundraising at my alma mater, University of the Pacific out in California. Was at San Diego State University for 10 years, where I was in overseeing our annual fund and was major gift officer and oversaw and ran our Aztec Varsity Club and our Aztec Football Legacy on our student athlete alumni component. And then most recently ended up at University of Minnesota, working for Gopher Athletics in the Big Ten here in Minneapolis, which is where I still am today. So that is a little bit about me, and hopefully that's enough to fake some credibility for everybody here.
You're too humble, Morgan. That is a lot of credibility. I was impressed because I knew you had spent a lot of time on campus, and then I was asking you for some notes for leading up to the session, and I was like, wow, is that long? Okay, so thank you, Morgan. Mike, how about you? Can you introduce us?
Yeah, sure. It looks like we're the M&Ms, Morgan. I just noticed that with the initials, but yes, Mike Martin's my name. I am the academic advisor and transfer services person here at Hagerstown Community College. Specifically, I have a caseload of about 140, 150 student athletes that I work with. I've been at HCC for about 25 years now. I was a student athlete here, went on to be a student athlete. I was a baseball player at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, came back and coached here for about 4 years before since the time I've been here advising, I've always kind of advised student athletes. My role changed here within the past 2 to 3 years, where I finally get to case manage them. I always work with them, but they're specifically my group now. And case managing, you can get a little bit more detail with them, which is where Mongoose in the past 2 to 3 years for me has taken off as my main communication tool with my student athletes as I case manage them. Like I said, my role is mostly working with all the student athletes. There's about 14 teams that I work with.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so let's talk about that. I know we were talking before we went live with this session about how fall semester, I can feel it in New England. The fall is coming. We are excited, and then we'll be sad in the winter, but that's okay. But we're talking about fall semester and getting ready. Morgan, I'd love to cue you up so that you can tell us what you were doing around this time, but let's start with Mike. Let's talk about what you're doing right now. Mike, what are you doing to prepare for upcoming fall? What best practices would you offer to others who are working with student athletes as they're preparing for the new semester?
Sure. Anyone that works in student services knows that the summer is our busiest time of year as you prepare to get students into classes for the fall. Once fall starts, it kind of slows down a little bit. Sounds weird. We get students on campus and things slow down. But in the summer months, we're actually trying to get students registered. And that involves a lot of communication, especially with new students, to try to get them in as soon as possible so that they're not waiting to the last minute to register for classes. Specifically, student athletes that have to have classes at certain times to work around practices. You can't wait until the last minute and then take what's left. So starting in April is when we started fall registration here. So we're in the last month right now. And as I was sharing with you guys before we came on live here, this year with 140, 150 student athletes and the communication that we've done with them, I'm actually down to between 10 and 20 student athletes that need registered because I've spent most of my time registering them. But I look at texting and the whole thing with Mongoose here, that I've been able to get them in because the communication has been better. I'm probably 60 to 70% responses from student athletes within half an hour when I send a text. Almost half of them will respond within 5 minutes. And that's the data that you can pull on Mongoose. You can see how quick students respond. My student athletes are responding close to 50% within 5 minutes of a text message I send out. And like I said, I'm probably closer to 70% within a half an hour. So the fact is emails, it's a few days before they even see it, if they see it. And phone calls, if you try to call a student in general, most like a student athlete, they don't recognize the number, they're not answering. But the text messages seem to be the main mechanism of how they respond. And it's so interesting when I text a student athlete that they need to get in and see me. Normally I'll get thanks for the text or thanks for the reminder. And then in our system, I'll see the appointment happen within 15 minutes after that. So it's just been, the timing of it is just so much quicker and so much more efficient. And that has made a huge difference in me getting student athletes registered for this fall semester.
So we have, I'm going to jump off and then I'll come back to you, Morgan, because we did have a question. Someone was asking about when you're text messaging. So this is something that's working really well for the student athletes. They were wondering, how do you keep organized so that you know how to reach students, how to reach their parents, how to reach your fellow faculty, fellow admins, any insights that you want to offer into the audiences that you are texting and how you kind of like what your policy is around who you're texting and who is texting you?
Right. So normally the Cadence Mongoose number that students can text, I try to protect that number as much as possible, meaning I want students to realize that if they use that system right now, students and parents can contact me through phone, email, and texting. When I meet with my student athletes, they know from the very beginning that my priority responses are going to come from the texting and with the Mongoose software. If I'm working with faculty or staff and it's very critical that they work with me, they're going to get my personal cell phone number and text number. I don't like to give that my Cadence number out to faculty and staff because, again, it's very important for me to have student athletes use that number specifically. Faculty know that they can email me and staff, and that's usually how I compartmentalize that. Phone calls are usually outside people. It's usually people that I work with within the state, but normally it's very efficient and compartmentalized that the Mongoose number is specifically for student athletes. They know they can't call it, they know they can text it, but they also know that because I protect it and value it for them, that they get quick responses. And I tell them that they can communicate with me 24/7. Because it's an app on my phone, I don't hear it if a message comes through. I always tell student athletes that they will not get a text from me for me seeking something from them between 10 at night and usually 6 to 7 in the morning. If they text me between those hours and I'm awake and I see the message, I will respond 24/7 with them. So I always try to get back to the messages in the evenings, because again, I don't take my laptop home with me. Okay, I don't take my phone in my office home with me. I take my phone. If I'm sitting on the porch in the evening, relaxing, if I'm watching TV, I'm in Mongoose responding to students. And it's just easier to keep up with that. And it's just so increased, like I said, the efficiency of getting things done. I hope that answers that question.
Yes, and please, if there are any follow-ups, do put those into the Q&A or into the chat, but that sounds good to me. And it also makes me think, Mike, of that story that you told me about the baseball team and having a rescheduled game, and how being able to reach them in a way where you knew that they were going to get the message really helped. Do you want to tell that story?
Yeah, so case managing students, specifically student athletes, the benefit that I've had with Mongoose has been that I have individuals that I can text. Okay, so I have their individual number that I can reach out individually and communicate with. I also have, if you use the Mongoose software, there's the ability to create segments. Segments are where I can create groups. So I have the men's baseball team, I have the women's softball team, I have women's volleyball, I have the men's basketball team, that I can actually create these pockets where I can then send a mass text to that group. I can also text the whole athletic department. And I've done that where I've actually sent them messages just to say, Happy Thanksgiving. Very personal. Okay. Now the baseball situation was, the baseball team here at Hagerstown was supposed to have a game on a Saturday that we were going to get bad weather that came rolling through. On that Friday, they made a decision to move the baseball game from Saturday, where it wasn't impacting classes at all, to a Monday afternoon game. As soon as I realized that the game was getting moved from the weekend, where it didn't affect any of their classes, to a Monday afternoon, where some of those guys on the baseball team had some classes on that Monday afternoon, it gave me the ability to shoot them a baseball team in that segment. I sent them a message that just said, hey guys, I saw that your game got canceled from Saturday, got moved to Monday. You know, now would be the best time to communicate with your instructors to say, hey, you know, I wasn't going to miss class on Monday. Now I am. Just letting you know, and communicating so that you know what assignments I might need to turn in, or, you know, what am I going to miss in class? That was critical. And a lot of them shot back with a thumbs up or thank you, or, you know, I'll get on that right away. Where normally that would have went by the wayside. And all those guys on the team got the same message, that if they had a class, they could communicate with their instructors. And it was almost like a reminder to them to reach out. And I do it with student athletes, but again, if you're case managing any group of groups of students, is like student activities, and you have your clubs, you could do segments for clubs. You could do, it goes beyond student athlete. Now with student athletes, it works great because they're generally traditional age students that operate in the world of texting. So which is why it works so much better. I don't know if you'd have, you know, we don't have a lot of non-traditional athletes. And sometimes your non-traditionals may or may not use text well, but the traditional age students, that's their mechanism of communication.
Morgan, I wonder if you can fill in for us, because if I'm thinking about your experience, I'm thinking about you engaging with people who are maybe older because they used to be student athletes and now they're student athlete alumni. So can you tell us a little about what works when it comes to texting and engagement with that population, and that from that perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And so when I was at San Diego State specifically, and I was charged with heading up our student athlete alumni organizations from a development side. And so a big component of that was not just solicitation for sports specific giving, but it was the event component that went along with it. So every single football home game, our Asset Football Legacy group had their own tailgate where members that paid their membership dues were invited. Guests of those were invited. We would invite former athlete prospects or donor prospects, in fact, to get into there. But the thing was, and I will caveat that since my departure, San Diego State is now a Mongoose client, and their life is completely better and different in all the ways that Mike exposed for that. But the hardest part for that group for me was it was all email-based communication leading up to the event. And I would text like the president of the group or text the guys on the ground the day of, but we had so many dynamic changes that were happening on event day or with leading up to it the day before. I was out at the stadium getting ready instead of in the office, and I couldn't really communicate with the group as a whole. I could only communicate with one person and then have that trickle down come, and then have to go back into the office to send the email, to rerun the email list out of our CRM to then reload it in. So had I had the access to Mongoose and Cadence when I was in that role, it would have been a game changer for the exact reason that Mike said, because I could build a segment one time and have it on my phone and be able to send at least individual messages out from my phone to the people that I needed to then communicate those changes on game day or the day before, anything like that. And so I think that texting isn't really dependent on age when you get to that kind of group of people, because they're the student athlete alums are, from an advancement perspective, the single most difficult group to mine into. I think a lot of Mike can probably appreciate this. Like, student athletes work their butts off during their time as a student athlete. And it's having 2 full-time jobs, right? We all think how our college was. I wasn't a student athlete, Mike, you were. And so you have 2 full-time jobs. So by the time you graduate, you're less inclined to want to be engaged with and give more effort because you just gave your time. And so finding a ways that you can meet the communication needs from that group is huge, instead of trying to force them to communicate with you. The only option I had was email, and it didn't work, but I didn't have another method to reach out to these guys because they were already participating in game day. They were already there. They want to be informed. They want to know. They just don't want to put in any work or time because they already did that for 4 years. And so for me, having a tool like Cadence, especially with the power of the app and everything, would have been a game changer, literally and figuratively, for us in that communication realm. And then same with our homecoming events for all of our student athletes and things of that nature as well. So yeah, I don't know if that answered it all the way, but
Yes, that's great. And that's another good perspective on it. So we're hitting on a lot of themes that are specifically applicable to student athletes, whether that's alumni or current students trying to navigate that balance that they need in order to be successful across all of those different components of their lives. And we're also hitting on just some generally good student engagement best practices. I wonder if you both have any other tips and things that you have found to specifically work really well with student athletes. I know, Mike, you hit on a couple of these, but you have such a wealth of anecdotes and knowledge and insights into how to do this since you spent so much time doing this work. And what else would you suggest for those of us who are trying to engage with student athletes specifically, knowing the challenges that are unique to that student population?
Yeah, all of our time is valuable. You work in higher ed and around higher ed, time is of value. So I want to throw out a couple tidbits here. I've also found that my walk-in traffic that I see with student athletes, I have one walk-in day a week. It's a Monday. The other days are appointment days. Tuesday to Fridays are my appointment days. I've found that my walk-in day traffic has become far less because students will text me typical questions that they would normally come in for on walk-in days. And I find myself doing more advising. I laugh because I'm sitting here in my office. I find myself doing more advising with 4 or 5 students at the same time through text and giving them answers than I do with people just journeying to my office now, because I can find that the basic questions that they have are being answered through text messaging. And that then creates more time for me when I'm here in the office to do other tasks that I may need to do. But one thing that I've really worked on is, and I found that it's valuable, is some of the students that I get messages from, I'll work with them on making sure that I text them. If I hear that they're not in class for some reason, I'm shooting them a text message right away and saying, hey, I just got a message. Why aren't you in class today? Is everything okay? And the one student, like some of the one student athletes, I have to case manage in more detail, meaning they must meet with me once a week. If they're having some difficulties in classes, or if they're having difficulties with grades, And those particular students that must check in with me every week, we'll design something where if it's an 8:30 class in the morning and they're struggling, they must text me when they get to class. And if they don't text me, it's on my schedule to text them and find out, why aren't you in class right now? So it's a great way to stay on top of students. Like I said, more than email and more than the phone, I'm texting them saying, hey, are you in class? You're supposed to text me when you get to class. And a lot of them will, and I don't have a huge group, but the small group that I work with, they're texting me when they get to class to check in. I've also found that if I need something and they're on a bus traveling somewhere, I can send them a text message and get an answer where they don't have their laptops with them, but I guarantee you the student athletes are carrying their phones with them. So again, it's just made it very easy and convenient for me to get answers and for them to get answers more than any other communication piece. And I will say this, with the Mongoose software, it's very easy to update phone numbers. It's very easy to update information in the system. I use the data management tool, which is part of Mongoose, to import rosters into my segments. And it takes less than 2 minutes for me to update a roster if it's set up that way. And I would offer myself out there, if there's anybody else that is trying to do this and they need somebody to help them through something and how to import a roster or how to import a group of students into a segment, I'd be happy to share how we've done it here. But it's very nice and easy and convenient for me to update rosters. I'm finding in August is we're starting to add students and delete students off rosters that aren't coming, students that are coming. I'm almost going in and doing data management weekly to update the roster so my segments are up to date. Because you don't want to text somebody that's no longer coming. You don't want to miss somebody that's been added to the roster in the last week. And again, I think Mongoose has made it very easy for that data management to happen.
It sounds like it's having the right tools to save you time because you're trying to scale this really personalized approach that I'm sure the student athletes are very much benefiting from. And then also having the tools that help you to reach them where they are, because the student population is more likely to be on the road, but also trying to balance their schoolwork and having to manage, like Morgan, what you said earlier about having two full-time jobs, basically. And so that's insightful. Morgan, what would you add to that? What worked really well with student athletes and with student athlete support and engagement when you were on campus?
Yeah, and it's great hearing Mike's perspective dealing with the direct interaction with the student athletes. And I remember when I was on campus for so long dealing with student athletes, I think we kind of have a tendency to forget that they are indeed students and that they have this similar kind of student life experience on campus, but they also play a sport in addition to that. And so I think that what kind of is nice to shed the light on is the power of Cadence, not just specifically for an exact role like Mike with student services and the impact that it can have on that one-to-one communication, but looking at the value that a product like Mongoose and Cadence can bring to the entire student lifecycle experience and the student athlete lifecycle experience. I think having our multi-channel approach, right? We have Cadence Chat and we have Cadence Text, like as these families and these students are looking at schools to select for their child's future, for the single biggest decision of their lives, I think it may seem like a small thing to us, but being able to demonstrate that your institution is making the investment and taking the time to find ways to customize their communication to your son, your daughter, to yourself as a student athlete during your time there goes a long way in not only their student recruiting experience, but there's their athletic recruiting process as well. I mean, if you have two schools are identical and one of them's using Mongoose and one of them saying, yeah, we'll just email you, you got to check your student email account, which I think I did twice. And I graduated from college a lot of years ago. It's the little things that really can personalize the difference in the student experience, right? Is their coaches, their support staff like Mike, their experience with and how they engage with the people that help deliver this experience to them. And I think that Cadence, with the versatility of the tool product system that we have, can really stay with the student from their freshman year application all the way through their senior year of graduation or their second year in community college and beyond, and allow them to not only thrive with the personalized, engaged conversation they have along the way, but after their time is complete with their institution, their time is complete with their sport, it allows for that connection and that follow through, and that message and communication still be updated along the way. So I think the value of cadence in the long term goes way beyond just being able for Mike to give them an update on the game time. It's more of, it's a show of good faith and a show of good effort from your institution that we want this experience to be seamless, to be personalized, and to be effective for your child here during this time and for you as a student athlete, because we know how hard it is. We know how much time you're giving to yourself, to your family, and to this institution. And so I think the value of cadence is pretty widespread and can really have a major impact at an institutional level as well.
Laura, I'm going to follow up with that because I think Morgan just hit on it. And you used two terms earlier where you said engagement and you said personalization. And again, it could be a quick, like I've taken advantage this way too, where I've went to a soccer game as an example, and one of the student athletes on the soccer team scored a goal. Well, I'm following up that night and I might send him a message saying, you rocked that goal tonight. I was at the game. And then an emoji with like a fist bump with a soccer ball even. And it talk about personalization and talk about engagement. It goes beyond just that, hey, I'm using this because I need something, or I'm using this because are you in class, or I'm using this. Like, this is a way that I can actually send them a exciting thing about the sport. Like one of our pole vaulters last year, one of our female pole vaulters made nationals. And as soon as I saw the post, of course, it wasn't around this area, but as soon as I saw the post that she had made nationals, I shot her a text message right away. You know, just as a way to say, hey, Michaela, congratulations. I saw you made nationals. Great job. I'm excited to see what you can do. Personalization beyond just academics. It's the athletic piece. It's the, I'm seeing it enough to send you a message. And texting is a whole lot different than an email or something like that. It's more laid back. It's more, wow, that's pretty cool that they're connecting with me through that. And I'm happy Cadence has even created an app that I can still keep it's on my phone. It's on my personal phone. That's my choice, but it's a way that I can still keep my work text messages separate from my personal text messages. So, you know, in a world where we operate on text messages, it's so great to have a way that I can keep my own personal messages away from my work text, but I can still have it on my same phone. And it's what I elected to do. And it's just, like I said, it's created this massive change in how I operate as an academic advisor.
So we have a question that's coming in and comes in often when we're having conversations with people who are on campus and especially interacting with traditional age students. And that's about emojis and GIFs or GIFs, however, that's the question too. But emojis and GIFs. So I know, Mike, you use emojis. How do you keep up with, like, what's your strategy? How do you keep up with like emojis and what they mean and which ones to use and like tell us more about how you approach working that kind of visual generation engagement into your messages.
Well, it's interesting because I have a son that's in college right now. He's a sophomore. So of course, with him and his friends, and you try to stay in the know. I'm, you know, not a young guy myself, but I like to utilize technology. And, you know, the emojis bring a different perspective. It's not just words, but you throw a little emotion in and you throw a laugh in every once in a while. And like I said, texting has been a way that it's formal, but it's not formal. It's more, I feel like I can say to a student, what's up? And I would never say that in an email, but I would say that in a text message, and it's normal to say, hey, I saw you texting me, what's up? But that's what students like. That's how they engage. I find that I use a lot of thumbs up. I use a lot of fist bumps. I use a lot of, you know, arm strength things. I use the emojis for the sports. Like, so if it's volleyball, I'll throw a volleyball into it. I'll throw a soccer ball into it. I'm always, if it's something to a team, I'll use a textbook first for student and then their sport after it. So you'll get like one of those little composition books followed by a soccer ball, or a composition book or a green notebook followed with a baseball. always look to do that. But if it's just with an individual student, it's usually the thumbs up, the fist bump, the okay, I'll use. But it's just it's that kind of stuff, because that's what they're doing to me. They're sending me emojis. And so of course, if it's their birthday, happy birthday with like a birthday cake. I mean, it's that kind of stuff that has taken my relationship with them and built it. That it solidifies that. It makes it feel like I'm very normal and approachable. I'm not just this, professional higher ed person that can't have fun or can't engage a little bit of like normal communication that they see on a daily basis, and I find that in doing that, they're more likely to engage me, which has been, I'm not this administrator at a college that's sending these formal emails. Like, this is a human being that can have a little fun with text messaging and follow up if I do something good, or if I'm not in class, or if I do something well athletically or academically. I'm praising them that way. And it's just, it's the 21st century way to personally engage somebody. So I hope that makes sense. That works.
Thanks for getting specific about the suggestions or like the examples too. And it is all about being relatable, right? And all about being a human behind the text messaging, because then they know that you're there to support them. And that's so great to hear. I love hearing how you're using text messaging, how you're relating to students, because I know that that's so key to retention and to student success. Morgan, wrap us up. We're a minute over, but what about GIFs, GIFs, emojis, visuals, anything like that on your end? Any anecdotes to share to wrap our session today?
Yeah, I mean, like Mike kind of alluded to it, right? It's the personalization of communication doesn't just stay with students. That's for anybody. I feel like when we're using the Cadence platform, but particularly student athletes, right? So student athletes, their schedule is a nightmare. Every moment of their lives is scripted. It's timed out. It's exhausting. So I think that any chance that you can to kind of help them escape from that routine, escape from that rigor and that regiment that they're so accustomed to, whether it's sending a hey, great goal text message on Cadence that Mike said, or it's mentioning a joke that you guys had in your last academic session, or that happened in the later, something like that. Like, be a human being, right? And Cadence allows you to be that person, as you said, behind the text message, and to really identify yourself as their counterpart, their friend, their ally, and you're going to get the results delivered. So as Mike said, the recruitment rates are through the roof, the registration rates are through the roof. Like, the more you allow yourself with the technology resources that you have to be different and to be personable, the higher level of ROI you're going to have in whatever kind of position that relative it is. And Cadence is definitely a tool that can help you do that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks, Morgan. All right. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Mike, for offering us some examples and some insights, and offering yourself for more information. If anyone is interested in hearing more about what he shared today, or generally how to engage student athletes, we will be back same time, same place. Not same place, different link, but in Zoom. I'll be here in the same place next week for our next Ask Me Anything session. So we'll follow up with the recording and with a link to register for that if you'd like to join us for a session that's more generally about student success. But have a great afternoon, and thank you again for joining us, everybody. Bye.